Hi, everyone. This is George Sandman with Core Value Advisors Software. And today I'm talking with Homer Smith with Convergent. Homer is a certified financial planner. He's also a certified business exit consultant based up in Gig Harbor, Washington. And Homer, you want to say a few words about you and your practice before we get started?
Yeah, thank you, George, and good to be with you and excited to talk about the three dimensions of growth today. So my practice, Convergent Wealth Partners, is a boutique wealth management practice really focused on working with private business owners, which is how I was introduced to Core Value and George, and also a part of a larger RIA called Integrated. And we have a business alliance group where we are working with CPAs and advisors across their group on working with business owners and building more value and bringing more value to the table for them. So excited to take this framework you're working on, and I've been adding it to our services that we're providing. And the conversation around this, I think, has been really helpful and valuable in how we're approaching this. So yeah, excited about this.
Thanks, Homer. And Homer, you've been really supportive, excited, and been provided some really valuable feedback on the three dimensions of growth, which is a concept we unveiled in June, and it's based on the concept that to get a business owner where they need to get them to that ultimate measure of success, there are three. I started thinking about them as factors, and then settled on calling them dimensions because they interact together and really impact each other. And the three dimensions of business growth, or the three dimensions of growth, are predictable profits and cash flow, which provides the launch pad for creating predictable growth. And here we're talking about revenue growth and value growth, and then ultimately converting that into predictable equity value so that we know at a given date we should have a high confidence that we can monetize the equity value of the company at an aspirational value, at the value we need. And Homer, I know that you've been writing some blogs about this. You're applying this concept to your practice. Any comments?
Yeah, we've been taking the same concept and kind of converting it from, how a consultant might look at this to how it might look to a client, or how we'd apply this to a client world. And I think you use very similar language throughout, but we translate that first layer of predictable profits and cash flow to the value capture stage, the second predictable growth to value creation, and then ultimately that predictable equity value to value realization. And so how do we actually help them realize the value that they've been working so hard, and how do they defend that value? So that's taking the framework and just thinking about how would a client see it, how would I be able to translate it to language that really makes sense for them. And so this has been really a really helpful framework to do that.
And you've been using this with clients already, right? Taking it out for stuff? Yeah.
We've just started since you started the process back in June in the first blog. I just released our client version of that blog, and now in any presentation we're doing to clients and the professionals we work with, we're using this framework and explaining how we bring all of our systems together and processes together to ultimately hit that aspirational value for clients and achieve not just their business goals, but their entire wealth plan through this process.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? What I always found fascinating is that financial planners, you, and business coaches, which is a completely different profession, start with the same end goal in mind. Let's talk about what this means to you personally. Now we're going to come back and talk about the asset and how that asset can help you realize your personal goals, which is the name of the game.
Yeah.
Super cool. It's funny that I switched the slides while we were talking, because we think in terms of capturing value and then creating value. And I'm going to take a sec to explain to people what we mean here, because Homer is a trained professional. This may not be as intuitive to you as it is to Homer and I, who live and breathe it every day. And I'm just going to jump forward one more slide. So there are some concepts that you should be aware of. And actually, John Leonetti and his certified business exit consulting program credential talks about these as well. And I refer people to, if you have specific interest in exit planning, John's organization is the one to see. Range of values, for a given industry, let's say it's 2 times EBITDA to 6 times EBITDA. Today, the client's EBITDA is 1.2 million, which means their enterprise value, what a buyer would pay after going through due diligence, would be 2 times EBITDA or $2.4 million. Now, without moving the needle on revenues, without getting into aspirational revenues, we can do a risk mitigation engagement. And by mitigating risks, by boiling out company-specific risks, maybe move them from 2 times earnings up to the max 6 times earnings. So now we're multiplying that 1.2 million by 6, and we have 7.2 million. So we've already had a $4.8 million impact, almost $5 million impact on the value of the business, assuming someone will write a check for that. What if that's not enough, right? And Homer, this is what you work with every day. What if we need to get into an aspirational value? Or importantly, and this is on the management consulting business advisory side, what if the CEO, as is so often the case, says, listen, I don't care about value, or I know what the value is. I really want to get to $10 million a year of EBITDA, and I want to be able to just do that going forward. And I think that would make my life better. So an aspirational revenue goal, which is often how business owners communicate it. You want to comment a little bit on this, on moving from capturing value into creating value?
Yeah, I think the term that I use a lot, and I've used for the last 10 years or so working with business owners, is that first level, that risk mitigation level. With individual clients, it's helping them look at their business from the eye of a buyer or investor. Mm-hmm. And too often business owners can't really see the warts. It's their baby. They can't admit that there's issues with the baby. And so just helping them have an objective point of view, which, the core value software does a great job of being able to do that and walk them through that process with the 18 value drivers. Then once they understand that and we can capture that latent value that's sitting in there, it's then transforming into, is that enough? And what is the value gap after they've hit that potential value? What is that value gap that's hit their ultimate financial goal? So again, the framework just works really well in walking them through that process of first initially just getting the basics in place, getting that foundation in place before we can really work on creating that aspirational value.
Yeah, and you just hit on a very, very important point. Predictable profits and cash flow. We get 3 things. If we're successful in creating this state in the client company, we've made a company that's easier to run. So what I didn't mention is we know that CEOs from running core value with over 25,000 companies, from Homer and his colleagues running core value with 25,000 plus companies, 60% of CEOs want to grow. And when they say grow, they mean revenues. essentially 20% say that they want to make their company easier to run. And almost 20%, 17% say that they're getting ready to sell their company, only to find out, and I have this 83% number, 83% of the people who think they're preparing to sell their company actually find out that this number will not be enough and that they need to move into the growth. So about 75% of CEOs want or need growth. And Homer, you just kind of teased out a point that I wanted to make sure I underline. When we hit this predictable profits and cash flow, we've made the company easier to run. It's predictable, right? So now we're sleeping at night. We've got a launch pad for growth. And without this launch pad for growth, if you do not understand your cash flow, growth is incredibly expensive. And we need to know how much cash is going to be coming in and have high confidence in our cash flow. And a company with predictable profits and cash flow is going to move from this 2 times earnings, bottom end of the range of multiple, to the top end of the range of multiple. So we're already increasing value within the multiple range at that level of revenue or EBITDA. Super cool. So core value. Go ahead.
To interrupt you, it gives them options when they get to that point too, whether they want to invest that predictable profit and cash flow in the business themselves to grow, or whether they've now created enough value to be a worthwhile investment to bring in outside capital to do that growth as well. So where before, if they were just sitting on the bottom end of that range, it's they're not getting enough value to really bring in outside capital. They're not generating enough cash flow predictably to invest themselves. So, they do need that foundation to really be able to grow significantly.
And you just used a term that Chuck Richards, the guy who developed core value software, uses all the time, which is creating options. Because so often a client may start saying, well, I want to do X. And when you get them, when you start setting this launch pad or this foundation and make their company easier to run, they change, they select another option. They're like, well, wait a second, I want to blank. That creating options is actually a great end state. You can decide. You're going to have a lot of different ways in which you can view your future. That's a terrific point. Thanks, Homer. Core value, our methodology is based on 18 growth and equity value drivers that make up a totality of a client's operation. And the important thing is understanding within the context of where the client wants to go, which are the high priority growth drivers, right? Where do we really want to focus our time and energy? And I created this graphic to help explain there are 18 growth and equity value drivers, and each of those has 3 to 8 additional subdrivers, which gives us a full alphabet, if you will, of 78 options. That's why of the 18, you'll notice there are 24 things called out here, 3 sets of 8. There are 8 areas that are high priority for creating predictable profits and cash flow. There are an additional 8 that will help us, once we have these in place, that'll help us create predictable growth, predictably grow profits and cash flow. And then an additional 8 for creating predictable value. And so starting your engagements, guys, with planning to put best practices in place for each of these 8 you're already earning your keep in a big way. You're making your client's life better. Their company is better run, easier to run, positioned for growth, and you've probably in the process improved your client's the quality of your client's life. Homer, anything you want to add on that?
No, just in working through, your blog plus kind of my client-facing version that I've created, and then now having gone through the second one on predictable growth, again, it all makes sense. It provides a clear framework, clear projects that are going to deliver that, and I think the way you've laid it out here, which is the first time I've seen this, really brings it home. So I like how you're doing this. It's really making a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks, Homer. I appreciate that. And it's funny, your colleagues, we got a lot of really positive feedback when we first put the 3 dimensions of growth out a couple of months ago. Actually, as I said at the time, kind of a bananas reaction from the market. I'm going to take just a minute or two to walk through what these best practices look like. So senior management is a team that would allow the CEO to take significant time off the business. And that can be as simple as a week without checking in on this thing. And I have some funny stories from my own life to tell about that. But senior management team that has well-defined roles and is accountable to the CEO's personal goals, meaning they understand where the business needs to go to help the CEO reach their personal goals, the shareholders reach their personal goals. Human resources. Is there an org chart? Do people understand where they are in that org chart? And again, what they're accountable for. Recurring revenues. If we don't have to fight for dollars every day, if we have some portion, half, most, all of our revenues are on a predictable basis, and that can be by contract or simply by convenience, then the company is easier to run and more valuable. If we can prove to a buyer that some portion of our revenues are going to come in relatively automatically. Margin. We have margin at or above the industry's norm. Homer and I just talked about growth and the fact that growth is expensive. We want to make sure that we have margin at or above cash flow, right? It funds that cash flow at or above the market's norm. Financial and operating reports. And here we're going to talk about closing out the month on a timely basis, monitoring cash flow on a weekly basis, P&L and balance sheet, and critically operating reports. What flash reports do we have that we're looking out the windshield, not waiting for the results to come in after the end of the month, but looking out the windshield so that we know that we're predicting profits and cash flow. So we know before we have the financial output what it's going to be. There's a fractional CFO out there who said, listen, I work for a Fortune 100, and we spent hours every month working on our operating reports. We spent about 10 minutes on the financial reports because we already knew what they would be. The only time we spent time on the financial reports was if they didn't match up with where we thought they were going to be. And I'm going to contrast that with budget and forecasting. Budgeting and forecasting is when we move into growth, is the test of how strong your financial and operating systems are. Operating drives forecasting. Financial drives the ability to create a forward-looking budget. Sales plan and process, as opposed to salespeople simply hitting their numbers. Do we have a scalable process that we can apply to growth? Operations, again, is operations delivering in an orderly fashion on the promises made to the market by sales? Gets us back to predictable profits and cash flow. And by the way, to recurring revenues. And then customer satisfaction. And that's one we've talked about at length elsewhere. A customer sat starts in the field. Literally, if you're a brewing company, for example, Homer CDC is based on a brewing case study. The customer satisfaction of sitting in your living room with a cold beer and enjoying it starts with the barley, the hops, the ingredients, the water. It starts way out in the field. And so customer satisfaction is a great place to focus because it covers so much of the business. So those are the 8 areas that if we check mark, if we have these things running according to best practices, we're going to have a company that's running smoothly and for whom we can predict on a periodic basis what our financial results are going to be. And that has become this potentially a launch pad for growth. And it can be growth home or getting back to exit planning for the existing owner or for a future owner. And this company is going to have very high value at its given revenue and EBITDA range. Does that make sense to you, Homer?
It does. The way I like to look at that first area, analogy wise, is like a car. When you go and start your car today, you just go turn the key, you plug the key in and you twist it or you press a button, and all the lights flash for you. And you know instantly whether there's something wrong with your car. You're not opening the hood up, checking the oil, having to check whether the gas is in the tank and whether, your battery's connected. You just turn the key, and having this launch pad in place, having this foundation in place is basically to a point where you can just press the button or turn the key every day on your business and know exactly how it's operating. And so that's really the way I see that first layer.
Yeah, very cool. I agree with you. I like the analogy. So, Homer and I have been in a long conversation, and he's putting blog posts out on this to his client base, his prospect base, to his market on these. So, Homer, I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to walk through these with me and give your personal perspective and how it's working with your practice. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Any additional comments before we wrap up?
No, I just would say again, it's the last few months of working through this with you and building it out for our clients. It's definitely been I've been doing this for 10 years, really focused on the business owner space and kind of that growth to exit space and how do I fit in that as a wealth management role, and this framework and how we've kind of adjusted it a little bit language wise to fit our client base. It's the best way that I've had to explain what we do to clients in the 10 years that I've been doing this. So this was definitely I think a breakthrough in how you guys are thinking about it and how you're bringing it to core value subscribers into the field. And it's really allowing me to really hone in our message and I think create an even better message for how we're trying to do what we're doing for our clients through this 3 dimensions of growth framework.
Yeah, and thank you. And I really, I think you know this, but I really admire you and your practice and the level of service, the sophistication you bring to your client engagements. That your clients are lucky to have you because you're a student of helping them with this largest asset, and you're so heavily committed to it. And it's inspiring. And I hope. I'm very confident that it's going to continue to do very well for you. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. When things are rolling, it really is fun. So All right, excellent. Well, Homer, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to wrap up the recording here. Ladies and gentlemen, Homer Smith with Convergent out in Gig Harbor, Washington. And thanks, Homer. I really appreciate your time.
That's been great. Looking forward to seeing where this goes. Thanks, George.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk very soon. Okay, I'm going to stop recording. There we go.